kick us off, tell us a little bit more about what is Clay and what is this GTM engineer?
Okay, so Clay is basically a creative tool to help you turn any idea for growing your company into reality. Um, for engineers, I kind of like to think of it as engineers have an IDE where you can turn code into product, and we turn code into revenue generating activity, right? So that could be anything from, hey, I want to find a bunch of companies that I can sell my product to because they have a office in South America and their headquarters in New York, and I sell remote tools, so something as specific as that. And that's using kind of like third-party data you can find on the internet. Or it could be, hey, I want to expand some of my accounts. What are the best accounts to reach out to because they've been complaining about, missing feature, and we've recorded those calls and sales calls, and now we have that feature, right? So the analogy is really like this is a canvas, and we have data about companies and people, and then you can use it to do things to find new customers or expand existing customers. And the GTM engineer is a role that we created, that is, I think, like an AI native role. So it's like the evolution of what a RevOps person would do. And the idea is treat go-to-market activities like an engineer would. So think about it in systems. Think about, do we have the right data? Did we do the right tactics? Did they work? If not, kind of improve. If so, do more of them. And the idea, actually, we just hosted our conference yesterday, and one of the things um, that I like as a model to think of. I studied physics, so I like physical laws, and I'm like, okay, what are like the laws of go to market? And so the first one is you need to be unique, right? You can't do what everybody else is doing. That's the baseline. And then success actually, as you scale something, it turns into something that stops working, right? Because you raise the baseline. And so you always have to be changing what you're doing. And a go-to-market engineer is someone who can do all three of these things, right? Understands these laws and kind of uses them to their advantage. Those are my super abstract ways of describing how it works.
Very cool. And so this audience is really interested in agents, and you all have a perfect name for your agent, the Claygent, which is really an account researching agent. So salespeople, they need to find out information about the accounts. They're doing all this work to figure out who to target or which companies are good companies and what is that alpha or strategy to get in. You've been doing this since 2023, I believe, which is really early when it comes to really embracing LLMs and trying to do something unique. What was the initial vision for Claygent? What did it do then, and where are you today?
Yeah, I think the reason we were able to do it almost immediately um, was the whole idea with Clay was that unlike other tools that this is just some of the background that helps you kind of understand that everybody else in sales and marketing um, was thinking that the data is the moat, right? So they were like, hey, if we have all the company and people data, and the more users use us, the more company and people data we have, now we'll be the biggest company, right? But we kind of flipped it on its head, and we're like, data isn't the mode, data is a commodity. We get data from wherever is needed. And so we built our product to be set up for integrations as a first class citizen from the beginning. So everything was an integration in Clay. And we set up the infrastructure to be like that. So one of the decisions we made, which we can talk about later, was, all of our integrations lived in AWS Lambda functions that would spin up on demand. The point of that, actually, when I first set it up, was that we would have more junior people writing the integrations, and if they made mistakes, whatever, it won't take the whole product down. You can run them quickly. You can have like set them up, and they have their own kind of infra for being deployed. And yeah, and there's a couple of other reasons, but that was the idea. And so when LLMs first came out, we immediately were able to integrate like the first ones, and and then we immediately kind of like saw the opportunity to, for us, it was really about how do we get unique data that no one else is getting. So data providers, their whole thing was, here's 50 properties about a company, right? But what if you wanted to know if this company talks about AI in its support documentation. There maybe they'll add this property, maybe not. Maybe it'll be applicable for all of their companies, maybe not. Whereas with uh, an agent that goes and does research on the fly, we could give you that alpha, like that, that advantage before anybody else if you are creative in figuring out what is it that indicates that this could be a good company or customer for you. And so that was the initial kind of reason we built it.
So the idea is there's all this amazing information that already exists out in the world, but we have no way to make it structured or really actionable. And what Play does better than anyone else is create that process of really unstructured information about companies and how they operate, and then turns that into the moment of insight that an agent that you're building can feed back to a seller or someone in the sales queue take action.
Exactly.
Cool. And one of the cool things that you also eventually started to work on is Navigator. And Navigator was a little bit like the OpenAI operator, where it was a computer user agent, and it browsed the web very much like humans do. So humans need to type in information, they filter down, they fill forms, they click buttons, and then they explore the internet in a way that's not readily accessible often or neatly compiled. That was almost like the second iteration, I believe, of where you were taking your agent, is how to interact with the web. What is Navigator? What was the vision for it? And what was hard about it? Because I feel like you're going from just research into now form filling, action taking, and
Right.
really
But the
surfing.
but the purpose was the same. It was still it was all of that in the goal was to get the information, right? Because it was still, sometimes there's older websites where you need to fill out a form to get something, or it might be like a government website and you want to find who are all, people that work in some particular, in like a state senate, and you want to scrape that information, but you need to navigate a web page. So that was the real reason that we built it. And the thing about like Claygent is that we by keeping the use case, it's kind of a fat long tail, so it is narrow. We're doing research, but for the purpose of company and people data. And so then we can create better evals around what we're doing and then see if we're improving, rather than it's a general purpose tool for researching anything. Um, and that focus is what helps us, if we're using LangSmith and we're like, here are the evals that we improve. Are we making progress towards this? It helps a lot that the use case is clear.
So a big part of this is around getting clean data, and we see this a lot with a lot of our users, whether it's looking for research use cases, or maybe they're a text to SQL type app. Um, Data is often hard with LLMs because you have to make sure it's accurate. In the web researching use case, you have like form fields or HTML fields, CSVs, PDFs. How do you know if the data that you're getting is right, or you have hallucinations, or you have partial data? Like, what is that process to make
Right.
sure accurate?
I think maybe another principle that we used to build Clay was that the data is going to be inaccurate from the beginning. Maybe that's like I think there's a couple of things that seem counterintuitive, um, but almost if you just start the product off from that assumption, you'll build it different. So everybody else was saying that their data is complete. They have the best data, right? And not only do they have the best data, they have the only data. You just should. And everybody knows that's a lie. Um, and so they end up buying multiple products or they get stuck. And you know that you're selling something that isn't true, right? Whereas our kind of like approach was the data is going to be wrong and messy. In fact, we're not even responsible for it, right? We're just giving you the tools that allow you to get the data. And if you hired a software engineer, you're going to be doing the same things anyway, except we remove like 90% of the work so that you can actually experiment. So we don't guarantee that the data is correct. We just give you the ability to get it, and then we give you tools to review it quickly. So, and then we improve. Like the ideal thing is that we eventually get to it being correct from the beginning, but we don't assume that's true. So there's multiple ways to do that. Maybe you have an agent that goes collects the data, and then another agent that checks if it's true or not, right? Or maybe it tries to highlight the things that are not likely to be true, and then you can manually review them quickly, and there are tools in play to do that. But we don't assume, and we let you have a little, or we call it, I mean, the puns are too often, but like a playground where you can like experiment a little bit and see, which prompts are working and which aren't, which used to work in the past. There's versioning for them. So there's multiple ways in which our whole thing is we don't do it for you. It's kind of like Figma. Here's a design tool. You know how to use the line, circle, and the square, and you can draw anything. And it's the same thing, but for getting data. Another kind of like maybe philosophical point is that I don't think there is a complete canonical, data set for companies and people because they're living entities. You can slice it by different perspectives, and you should be able to ask any question about a company or a person, and get an answer, and LLMs help you do that. You might have like a description and then say, is this a B2B company, right? Or maybe it's unclear if it's a B2B company or a B2C company. Maybe it's a B2B to C company, right? And so having that flexibility is what gives you an edge over anybody else, who doesn't have that flexibility. And I think that's what's been working.
And just so in case the audience doesn't all know, like salespeople, you can buy a data set that will tell you how much does this company spend on software, or who is using our open source. You spend a lot of money to try to figure out, uh, is this account interesting for you to sell into, and basically the whole principle of play is flipping it on the head and say that data set is not fixed. It's constantly evolving, and you need tools for self to be able to get real information that's actionable in real time. And we're going to give you the tools to do it. And part of that tool is Legent.
You should become my spokesperson. This is way better than what I'm planning.
Um, but one of the interesting things that you brought up is this user experience with replays, and trust is really hard. And so a lot of times when we work with companies, they get stuck on this. Like, I can't trust the agent, or the agent is going to mess up, or it's not accurate 100% of the time. And you said that's fine, but you have this concept of a replay. We spend a ton of time working with companies on what is the right user experience for agents. Like, how did you iterate on the user experience for the products that you're building with Gen AI? Do you think we're at the right form factor yet, or what is the future going to look like?
I think we're also exploring. I mean, I think the way we make our UX decisions is we have some of these principles around uh, how the product works, and then we try to tie it back into it. So if we know that the data is going to not always be correct, then we need to give you a way to see how we got it and potentially give us feedback on it, which is why it makes sense for us to have a session replay. So a session replay is you can see how Claygent goes to a website, what is it doing to get the information, where it went wrong, and hopefully give us some feedback if it did go wrong, and then we can fix it over time. But I think everything in Clay is set up to be um, in service to the idea that the data is not 100% accurate, and won't be. And in fact, it is and I think this is where other people in the market are taking different positions. Some of them are saying, no, that's just because either you guys can't figure out the UX properly, right? And there is a better form factor than the one we have, which a big part of it looks like a spreadsheet where each column can go and get data, and then you can manipulate that. But some other people think that I think the bet they're taking is models get 2 orders of magnitude better. Things will be figured out without you needing to do all of this. And there is an actual canonical solution, or like some truth. For us, we actually don't even need to debate that point. We just need to be like, what is working right now, right? And I think if you're building a business, we need to make sure that what we're doing right now works so that we get the momentum to build what's next. Or some of the other people might be thinking, well, we're going to build what's next, raise a lot of money, and survive until that happens. Right? Those are two different bets. Um,
We think very similarly at LangChain. There's always like, you got to ship.
yeah,
And like, if we want to wait a week, it's like, no, we're shipping right now. And
right.
you have to.
But also, by the way, we're doing the other bets internally and seeing if it works. But we're not going to ship it if it doesn't work. Yeah.
And was session replay like a key hero of keeping a chip unless you were able to show and have more trust, or is that something that came later?
No, it was P0 because of the principle that, if you know from the beginning that you can't trust it, in 100% of the cases, or even 90, then we need to show you how we did it so that you can build trust, and then you can give us the feedback. And then I think making the feedback work is a P1, not a P0, but at least collecting it helps us.
Claygent crossed 1 billion runs in a few months back, so I don't know where you are now, but it's growing quickly. That's a lot of volume, and you've been working on this for a couple of years now, and you work with a lot of companies, and I can say Clay has really high volume. Is Clay when Claygent breaks inevitably, is anything at scale breaks, it's not a you problem, it's just a reality. Your data's broken, your software is gonna break. Does it break in unique ways because of the scale, or is it just like any software that you're dealing with?
I think a couple of maybe the non-obvious ways in which it breaks are it's hard to calculate rate limits AI or like on LLM runs because it's not like number of runs per second, it's number of tokens per second, and it's different for different models. We also have a unique thing where we allow you to bring your own API key um, into the product, so you might even be using this API key somewhere else. So and when you're if the agent is using tools and the tools have different rate limits, it's pretty tricky to figure out why something is slow, and then to debug it. So that's um, a lot of the ways in in which it breaks are it's slow or something happened. So if an agent makes a 7-step plan and then it fails in step 3, um, I know there's actually some of the functionality that LangChain provides is how do we restart from there instead of start from the beginning again. And also, yeah, that whole thing is pretty problematic and is the most common complaint is what is going on right now and where did it fall. And then just calculating rate limits on various tools or on the global kind of like key that we're using.
Well, I wanna give some time to what's coming next. You had your conference yesterday, you announced a lot. There is, Sculptor was announced. Maybe you wanna talk about Sculptor and Sequencer and a few of the other bigger launches that you had yesterday?
Yeah. Well, maybe just to give everybody context, the um, Clay started off as let's give you the best data enrichment in the world by aggregating every data provider in the spreadsheet interface, so you could build lists of who are the companies you were targeting using third-party data, and then we really like the ambition is every single idea you have for growing your company should be executed by Clay. And so the next step is okay, now that you have all this data, how do we get you first party data? So maybe someone visits your website and you want to know, okay, this is a higher intent company because they keep visiting my website. There's third party signals. So that's just data that changes over time. So maybe someone hired a CFO or like basic things like they raised money. But actually, we do things where we monitor our competitors' websites and see when they change their messaging. And it gives us indicators on what they're thinking and what's working and what's not. So all of these signals in Clay in the beginning, it's just a spreadsheet where you can uh, enrich kind of anything. And you actually tell us what the primary key is. Maybe it's the LinkedIn profile, maybe it's an email. But we just built this product called Audiences, where we introduce the concept of companies and people as a first-class citizen, and that means we can aggregate these signals on them. So that was a pretty big thing that we released in beta yesterday. And then the second thing is the tools for sending messages using AI are not really made for an AI world. They're made for substituting, strings that are kind of like populated. So we built something called like our own sequencer that's set up to send AI made messages. There are very specific things. It can't be all written by AI. It has to be parts of it. And there's a lot of different things for you to spot check it. So that's a custom build that's really powerful. And then we released something called Sculptor, which is a new agent that helps you build things in Clay. But actually, I think it's interesting because I think initially we're like, oh, this will help people who, the way I think about it almost is if you understand Clay and you have an idea, we should help you. Then the next step is you don't understand Clay, but you have an idea. And so that's where Sculptor will help you set it up in Clay. And the step after that is you don't know what to do and you don't understand Clay, right? We just connect your CRM. We understand who your best customers are. We identify which properties predict them. We find lookalikes like them. We figure out which of your customers, what you said to previous customers to convince them, and then we send the messages, or we even prep your own internal team. So the cool thing actually about Sculptor is it started off as an agent to help you build in Clay, but I found that the most powerful thing is you can ask it questions about tables that you've built in Clay, and that actually seems to be the more powerful use case. Where you're like, okay, which of these companies that I've built in this list, which of our products should I sell to them? And so we released this idea of your own business context. So we start to understand your business. Maybe you connect Notion and we can understand what, how you're selling your product, what your materials are around that. We look at your website, we look at your CRM, and we form a understanding of your business and then your product lines. And then we can say, okay, this is what you should say to this customer. And then you can update it. So I think Sculptor is going to be an agent that helps you understand really who are your best customers and what you should say to them. Yeah.
Agents all the way down.
Yeah.
How do you have now 5 products now. How do you know if it's working? Like, you have a lot of different users, not everyone's using it the same way. You, like us, have a builder tool
Yep.
where you're giving people tools to create their own pipelines and create their own applications to find GTM alpha. But how do you know if it's working? How do you have visibility? What do you track or what do you look at?
Yeah, those are the same questions that my head of finance has been asking me, so it's putting me on the spot. I I think there's really like two answers to that. So with something like Legent, we can just track the metrics. So we're on track to 2 billion runs this year. We can see how often, but we do collect a bunch of metrics, right? We take a look at actually in our latest fundraising round. One of our investors asked us like, what is the distribution of what's the usage distribution across all of our integrations? And initially I was like, who cared? It didn't seem like a really important thing. Probably I just didn't want to do it. But it ended up being a useful thing to see because we're like, oh, there's no like, there isn't like a specific data provider that is that everything is going to. It's kind of somewhat evenly distributed, which proves that the platform is useful, right? We're not like a pass through for one particular thing. The LLMs were by far the most used for particular situations, and so we can track that usage over time. And we do. So that's one way to know, okay, this is providing value, is how much usage is this feature getting, again, versus other things in the product. The thing that I've been thinking about now, actually, is so we use Clay to dog food Clay, obviously, and one of the things we're playing with is, okay, can we categorize all of our customers by use case, even though we are this open-ended tool? And then can we start to create kind of some health score to say, okay, we could do it by product, but I actually think it's useful to think of it by use case. Here are 8 use cases that people should be using. 3 of them are being used by this customer. Then they're an expansion opportunity for the other 5. Or maybe they're not a good fit for all 8 use cases. So we can see out of the use cases that are good fit for them, how many of them are they using? And I don't think it necessarily needs to be by feature because we're a startup. We're not like this is the end result. Maybe some of the features that we build aren't good or aren't being used effectively. And often, actually, whenever, sometimes our engineers would release a feature and then they'd come back 2 weeks later and be like, no one's using it. Then I'm like, hey, for 4 years, no one was using anything. So I'm okay with 2 weeks of no one's using it. And it sometimes takes some time. Or what is it an issue of discoverability? Is it that people are used to doing things a particular way? Should we turn it on only for new users and see what happens? there are many ways in which you can approach this to see, is this working or not? And I've tended to tell people it's less like engineering and more like gardening, right? If you're an engineer, you're like, here's a plot of land, we're doing this, and it's a command and control, and we know what we're doing. Gardening is like, we threw a few things into the garden, and if some of them grow, we start watering the ones that grow. And that's kind of what you're doing when you're building something new.
So this is my last question before I turn it over to the audience. So everyone get ready with your questions. But what is like one fun or wacky or powerful use case you've seen someone use and build with Clay?
Um, there's one that just happened a few days ago. I don't know if it is wacky, so I'll describe it anyway. But um, basically, one of our customers was telling us that he's getting divorced, and as part of that, he went around taking a video of all the items in the house and then using Clay to figure out how much they cost and how much they've depreciated over the time that they've been together. Um, and I think he told me it was the top post on the divorce subreddit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is wacky. And on that bright note,
Yeah.
uh, questions from the audience, and we'll kind of run around with mics. Yes, or I'll speak them out loud. I'll say them out loud. All right, up front.
So you mentioned like, having internal bets, shipping fast. The classic advice that Paul Graham gave was to do things that they'll scale. I'm very curious about how this idea kind of evolved over time, and if you're still doing unscalable things and how that might have guided the dream throughout Click.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is like, what are the kind of like unsustainable things that we're doing today, or how they guided the journey? I think like one of the early unsustainable things that we did was we were in a community of customers that and there were a lot of agencies that were trying to use Clay. So agencies might help you do some of your growth tactics. There are kind of like SDRs or BDRs that work with you, but externally. And we were in text threads with them on WhatsApp early on. They had a lot of groups where people were hanging out, talking about like different strategies. And we became friends with a lot of the people. The reason it worked, by the way, is that we were not selling them Play. We were like, hey, we're going to help you grow your business. I mean, our mission is to help businesses grow. And we were very much focused on, we will do anything to help you grow. So if you have any question, we'll help you with that, or we'll connect you with someone, or we will, solve the problem in real time. So a lot of the things, one of the like fun things that we did was my co-founder Varun talked about this. We used to do reverse demos. So if you jumped on a call with us, we wouldn't do a demo. We'd share the screen and then tell you to try to figure it out and then guide you if you get lost. So it was both like user research and we helped you figure it out and you learn the product. And if something broke, we were fixing it in real time while you were on the call. We're like, oh, okay, just give me 1 second. And then we fix it. And so people built a bunch of loyalty towards us because of that, because we were doing things that were completely unsustainable. Yeah.
All right, in the back.
We're new customers of Clay, as the enterprise Fortune 500 company. I've been hearing a lot about like the new playbook, like the ability of the account-based go-to-market playing as Clay played a big part of that. Help us understand in a high level of what is the new go-to-market playbook and how Legent helps that me.
Yeah, I think the question is, what's the new go-to-market playbook and how does Clay help with that? I want to try to say something specific. But I'll give you kind of what comes out to me. The playbook is the way we talk about it is you need to find your go-to-market alpha. So just like in finance, you need to know something or do something that other people aren't doing, and that's how you make money. It's the same thing in go-to-market. You need to be doing something that your competitors aren't doing. And so the alpha really is in Clay is if you can figure out a strategy that's very specific to your company and implement it quickly before other people figure out the channel that you're using or the messaging, or more importantly, who you're targeting, and being the new playbook is being hyper specific. So the more specific you can be about your customer base, the more you understand them, the faster you can target that group and then move to the next strategy. And Clay is designed to be hyper specific as well as allow you to change the strategy quickly. So companies that do this really well tend to have engineering teams that build kind of these growth systems, but then changing them isn't as fast or as easy. And in the past, other companies would leave it to be decentralized. So your SDRs might come up with a good idea, and then one of the account reps is doing something that everybody else is trying to copy, but it's hard to scale that. So Clay lets you take the best idea that someone has, scale it, and change it quickly. That's kind of like the systems way of understanding like what the new playbook is. But there isn't, by definition, actually, any playbook that everybody is using, if I could articulate it to you, it would immediately become commoditized. And I think what AI does is it makes it faster and easier to commoditize something, right? Any kind of advantage that's obvious, everybody is going to do the same plan, execute it quickly, and then you sound like everybody else. And sales, by definition, you need to stand out of the crowd. And by alpha, I mean, like, if it turns out that you could use AI agents to message everybody and that's working, it becomes the alpha is then you hire people because they will sound different than the AI agent, unless it's AGI, right?
In the front.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you for this thoughtful thought. I work with the sales, lead to cash, and you mentioned a lot about prospecting. This one component of your product is more in it's almost like pre-lead type of information. Yes. Okay, just want to confirm that because that's something that I may want to talk to my colleagues about.
Yeah. And I think I was talking to a couple of people about this before we got in, but I think the traditional model is you have a CRM that has all of your customer data, and it makes sense because you need to know who are your customers, who last talked to them, what is the next step for whatever. And it used to be that people enter that data into it manually, and the biggest challenge is like getting the people to enter the data, right? That's almost like the perennial thing. But now the data is being generated from Gong calls, from like product usage data, from support tickets automatically. And the idea is, how do we take all of that unstructured data and turn it into structured information? And people tend to struggle with keeping their CRMs clean, right? So where is the place where you put potential customers that aren't yet custom? People don't tend to love putting them in the CRM because it messes with things and you get duplicates, and are the account names the same, or do they belong to if there's a hierarchy, is this like, Google in Europe or Google in the USA, so I actually think Play is upstream of CRMs where you do all of that research. And then over time, especially as we add like the concept of companies and people, the question becomes like, why would you can put the data anywhere. You could put it into Snowflake. You could still keep it in your CRM. But actually, the future that I imagine is there's a storage layer, right? Snowflake, Salesforce, HubSpot, wherever. And then Clay, which takes all the action based on all the other insights that are happening around the business.
Hi, Kareem. Thank you for your talk. It feels like there's an explosion of go-to-market AI tools today. It feels like every startup wants to build an agent to help salespeople write better prospecting emails. And I think in a situation like this, there are maybe like two ways to succeed or stand out. One is having like really clean, clear, high-quality data. And then the other one is building better workflow orchestration that's really intuitive. Between the two, or if there's another one, what do you think is Clay's competitive moat?
I think that so competitive moats are interesting, right? Like maybe the traditional competitive moat is that we have integrations with 150 data providers. We have kind of like deals with some of them. And because of our scale, we can send them a lot more usage. So there's a lot of smaller companies that rely actually on our usage. And with the bigger ones, as long as we kind of keep growing really quickly, then we have the supply. The demand, right? And so that is a traditional kind of competitive mode. And like if you're starting off right now, if you think about it and you go to one of the companies and be like, what are you doing better than Clay? Like, why should we bother doing the integration? So in that sense, we have that moat. The way I like to think about it, though, is we have the product and everything that's in the company is built on a set of principles. The ideas kind of come out of those principles naturally. And so for us, it's, hey, I think I mentioned them, right? Like the data isn't going to be clean. So we need data from everywhere. We need ways to clean it, right? We can't fully rely on that. And then you can use it to build these really creative workflows or going to market that need to change all the time. Those are the two perspectives that we're doing that are different than everybody else. And the new entrants or, people who are coming in, there is an explosion of them. They're all like recent, but there's been a bunch of them that come and go. And I think they tend to try to, I mean, when you see a bigger company, you tend to try to counter position to them. So they're like, well, we're the easier Clay, right? And I think what's interesting to me about that is, we've thought about that as well, right? But the question is easy to do what, right? There's sometimes where you need to press a button. I'll tell you the example I use in the company. So I'm like, you could build a microwave or you could build a guitar, right? A microwave everybody should use. You should be able to come in, say 1 minute start. It heats your food. A guitar is a tool that you learn forever. And people who've been playing it for 10 years might still not know how to play flamenco, but they know how to play jazz. Wear a guitar, right? And if you said, let's build a guitar with 3 strings because it's easier to use, it seems, obviously bad to everyone. And so I think you need to be able to understand why you're doing that. And sometimes the moat is actually the product principles that you've built it on. That's why we have a community, because we are a creative tool and there's people, we have 70 clubs around the world where people meet to talk about what are the latest tactics that they can do. And it's not just Clay. They're thinking, how do I grow my business? Clay is just the way to execute their ideas.
I was going to ask, so great presentation, by the way, but in production, you probably see edge cases where your agents actually fail. How you guys account for these edge cases and how you guys cache read your sessions and prevent a risk of overfitting when you address the edge cases?
We use LangSmith.
All right, good end. Good end. Thank you so much, Kareem, for joining us. Give a round of applause.